Hi, welcome back to week 4 now. We'll start off with a little bit of a recap on what's been happening previously, mostly due to the fact they've been getting an awful lot of questions. Just 1 second while I just trick over. Yep, I was just checking who'd been actually accessing the course, and as you can see on this, I can actually see who's clicked what, where, when. Not a problem with our course here, but it was with the previous one we were looking at. So if I just go back, I'm just looking at the moment at any questions that we've had asked. There does seem to be a couple of us that I'm having to look into in a little bit more depth, because some of the questions that were raised were quite complicated. Keep your eye on the latest announcements as well, but I'm very happy that you're all using the question and answer facility very well. Feel free when you read the questions, if someone's asked a question, as some of you have, try and help them out as best you can. I think at the moment most of those questions have now been answered, so let's have a continuation onto this week's lecture. I just wanted to recap, because I've had a lot of emails as well from people, especially about the logbook, not so much about the reflective inquiry yet. So to recap, I think some of the people may have missed the first lecture and tutorial on this one. Don't think of it, and this goes in with the integrated learning of this short lecture we've got now. Integrated leads you to believe they're all connected in some way, and they are. So the workplace logbook is not a standalone document. It actually supports, what do you do that for? It actually supports the reflective learning journal as well. So whatever you pick out for your reflective learning, sorry, my computer's going mad. Reflective learning should be able to be traced back to an entry in your logbook. I don't know, the computer's having a bit of a nightmare at the moment. So it complements the reflective journal. Don't forget, the log sheet only outlines a task. There's not masses of detail in it. I mean, basically 1 sentence can do it. I'll show you an example of one in a couple of slides' time. But it's from your point of view, not someone else's point of view. It's what you understand was going on in that week. The journal, when we do the reflective journal, you pick an event out of one of the weeks, and it's the consequences of the task. It's what you perceive actually happened. What the goal was, did it go awry anywhere, what did you learn from it? So that's what the journal is. So the journal connects, it's interrelated with the log sheet. And as we've said previously, the horrible term, the yin and the yang, the two sides of something, the two aspects. So you've got it in the log sheet, and then you're going to analyse it critically from your point of view. So you've got the same thing in 2 different places, 2 different ways of looking at something. A weekly summary is where you spent your time, basically. You know, what you did each week. You can have an independent assessor. So if you haven't got so an independent assessor would suggest that maybe it was somebody at the QBCC or another employer or something. They should be able to appreciate what your role and duties were while you were doing that week. And from what I've seen of all the drafts I've been provided with, that is the case. You all seem to be in slightly different formats, not appreciably different, but you are conveying it in that way so other people would be able to understand what your skill sets were and what your responsibilities were. And we operate an honour system where we trust you. I'm not going to go around ringing up people and ringing up mentors and go, is this really true? Did you really do this? We're trusting you. So that gives you a certain amount of leeway. So the mentor verification, whoever your mentor is, they're going to verify what you put in there. We're not going to track them down and check it. We trust you for that. And that's part of being ethical and professional. We want to instill a high level of ethics, so you intrinsically know what's right and wrong, which all professionals should be able to do. It does appear to be an increasingly difficult thing to find nowadays, especially in a competitive business environment where the professional and ethical thing to do is not what your employer wants. So you end up with a professional dilemma at times. So some ideas for the logbook. We did this the other week, but again, from the number of questions and emails I'm getting, you can include in your logbook any admin you're doing, whether you're in the office or the site. Is it operational work? Are you out certifying stuff, or are you project managing stuff, or are you physically on the tools at some time? An admin doing the paperwork. It's all acceptable. If you find yourself in a position of some form of leadership, whether you're issuing instructions or guidance to people. I mean, if you're doing certification, you may be issuing guidance to home builders or architects. So that would be a useful one to do. Somebody, I don't quite know what's going on yet, but bloody, sorry, my computer is not being a good boy. Communication, and that can rely back onto all the admin you're doing. The communication could well be all the forms and everything you're filling in and certifying. It could just be verbal communication in a meeting. So any form of communication is acceptable. Teamwork, most of us work in a team. I notice a few of you seem to be very individual, but the team doesn't have to be the team that you work with. If you're on site and you've got a contractor and a professional advisor and maybe a building owner, there's a team. You can use that as teamwork if you want to. How you influence, or how stakeholders can influence you, or the other way around. Sometimes you'll find a stakeholder, which could be your boss, could be the client, trying to exert undue pressure on you to make a certain decision or to do something in a certain way which ethically or professionally you're not comfortable with. They'd be quite a good one for the reflective journal if it ever happened. As we said, conflict and negotiations. Now, conflict, we don't mean fisticuffs and kicking people. I mean, this is verbal and contractual conflict. How do you get around maybe there's a disagreement on a technical aspect or a financial aspect, and how do you manage to go and negotiate, find an even ground that suits both parties? A lot of that happens. Sometimes you might just be having this over overtime hours or something. Any of that's acceptable. Ideas on the work culture. Is it a comfortable work culture? Has it recently changed? Have you been taken over? Have you changed jobs? Do you notice a difference in the culture? Well, also, organisational change I just touched on again. So, you might find that organisational change is mainly when it happens where you already exist. But I'm sure you can pull it out for a bit to if you change jobs, to compare previous job with existing job, you might be able to find the benefits and drawbacks of each. And if you go back to a previous unit that you've done and have a look at the text there for Robbins and Judge, that could be a little bit of an underpinning. And for the assessments, people have been emailing me and asking again, and we went through this previously, a lot about assessments, and it's the ones that seem to be tripping people up are A1 and 3. So obviously it's a weekly report, the logbook, not daily, just a weekly one. And we provided a template that you can use. You can modify that template so there's not lots of empty white space on the page, or you might need more space if you're typing a touch more. It's up to you to do that. There's no word limit on that, but I don't expect these log sheets to be more than 1 or 2 pages a week. You can show the valid workday, so if you're sick, put in a sick. If you're on holiday, tell us. Don't cover them up. They're valid anyway. Your industry mentors assessment, which you've sorted out. Hopefully most of you have sorted out mentors. I know there's a couple of people with an issue with that. We're looking into that for you at the moment. The days need to match the reporting period. So you've got 12 weeks. What's going on here? You've got 12 weeks, so maximum number of days. So before we started the unit, we need 40 days recorded. That's 8 weeks. They do not have to be consecutive. I keep telling people you can cherry pick the best weeks to make up your 8 weeks before you started, and then we've got to record basically every week. These are consecutive, the 12 weeks during the term, during the unit. And there's a lovely little quote: every story's got three sides to it. There's your story of what happens, there's my story of what happens, and then there's the real facts. And that's really very true in a lot of things. So let's have a look at an example of a work log sheet. So there's your experience. So you've got the date, the project, the description, and what did you do? Anyhow, put a date down. Project, Wolf Museum. What did you do? Project manager. And you could put in a little brief about the job. You know, maybe you refurbishing the entrance lobby or something. And then, what did you do? Met known clients to discuss ideas. Work scope budget. Needed 2 concepts. A novel look to it. Sustainability creeps in. There you go. That's all we need. Next day, no particular project and that, just visit things with neighbours. And then the second thing, checked out a town plan, but that was on the same date. Preferably I'd like to see the date in that spare cell. 27th of the 7th. 27th of the 7th. Some industry training. Alright, you weren't at work, you went train. Perfectly good to put in. Any training you do, any continual professional development you do, you can pop it in. If you spend a day doing the assignment in the week, put it in. It's perfectly acceptable. Sick leave, I threw one in there. You can put that in. That's a day gone. No problem with that. And just a little hint there, if you've got things like sick leave is in a different colour to the main text, in a different colour to the training, then use colours to separate them out. Make sure you use the same colour all the way through, of course. So sick leave would always be red in this example. So you can put things in, so don't worry if you've got a day off, put it in. Holiday, leave, you can put them in, that's no problem. They're part of that log sheet. And again, coming through is how much time we've got to spend on this. Well, we touched on this before. I'll go over this again. The time's what you need to put into it, but we do have some very fundamental guidance for you. So, course introduced so we can consolidate content knowledge from other sources. So this is why we're referring you to previous units to start to draw. This is the integrated learning coming through. You're not just doing this as a standalone unit. You're drawing in information, experiences from the outside world. You're drawing in learning that you've developed in other units. So you're pulling them all together. So it's integrated. So don't treat this as a standalone unit. So the course duration is the same as any 12-week unit we have. It's 150 hours. That's for the whole 12 weeks. So if you divide that by 12 weeks, that means you really should be spending 12.5 hours a week on this subject, on this unit. That could be background reading, watching the lectures, doing your log sheet, reflective journals. So, considering the assignment we're talking to here, we've got 12.5 hours in a week. Assignments 1 and 3 account for 9% of the mark. So if you work out what 9% of 12.5 hours is, you should be spending 1.2 hours every week on your logbook and your reflective inquiry part. It's not a lot. When you drill down to that, it's not a lot. You probably spend a little bit more than that if you've got time. The weekly log, really don't expect it to be more than 1 to 2 pages long. If it's any longer than that, you're putting too much detail into it. And I think that's reasonable. 1.2 hours a week, it's not bad at all. You know, it's 2 lunchtimes, whatever. And just there to show you, assignment A1 is 3%, A3 is 6%, so that's 9%, so multiply it through. Self-efficiency, we should all be along these lines, so effective processes. Processes regulating emotional states and elicit of emotional reactions. What sort of processes can affect the way you feel about things and other people feel about you? There's a cognitive process, thinking processes. These are what we do when we're trying to do something and we're thinking about it. It's deliberate. It's not subconscious. So the cognitive process is required in the acquisition and then the organisation and the remembrance and the use of information. Now that will happen while we're doing this unit, but it happens at work all the time. So you get a new tender opportunity comes in, you've got a new set of drawings and maybe a specification or a scope. You've got to acquire the knowledge from those drawings and documents into your own mind. So as you acquire them, you organise them quite consciously. And then you're going to regurgitate that and use the information to produce your pricing. Same thing goes for any unit you study, where you acquire the information, you organise it, and then you use it to answer an assignment question. So that's quite normal. Motivation. If we're not interested in something, or there's no reward at the end of it, who's going to bother? Who's going to bother? So, what level of motivation is evident or reflected in the choice of a course of action? Generally speaking, people will always take the easiest course of action. They won't be looking for the clever, harder way. The computer's doing its own thing here. So we always look for the shortcuts. It's natural, it's well documented and researched. So motivation. You've got to work out what your level of motivation is and how did that affect what you did and the outcome. And the intensity and persistence of the effort needed. Now, I mean, if someone told you you're going to get $1 million for getting a ping pong ball into the top of a milk bottle, I think you would spend days and days and days constantly trying to do it. But if they said, oh, well, you know, you can leave work half an hour earlier if you file 300 drawings, I don't think your motivation is really going to be there for that. So there's a connection between the level of motivation required to the action, the complexity and effort needed to comply an action. Don't know why it's doing this. And then there's the perceived self-efficiency. People, you know, we've all got our own belief about how capable we are to produce things, to do things. Most of us are fairly neutral in the middle and think, yeah, we can do that. We might have to do a bit of research, bit of learning, bit of practice, but we can do that. And we'll get better at it the more we do it. On the other hand, there are people who think they're just excellent at everything in the world and they will dive in instantly and they will do it. Whether or not it's correct, we don't. It may not be the case, but they think they can do anything. And then at the far end of the spectrum, there's those people that don't have any confidence in themselves at all. They don't like to do new things. They underestimate their ability. It can be quite a drawback and quite serious for them. You see this quite a lot in bureaucratic organisations. I'll go back to when I had a very brief spell working for state government, and everybody around me were incapable. Bloody hell, we're incapable of making a decision. I don't understand. I do apologise for this. I'm going to have to restart the computer since it seems to have become very similar to my wife. And then you've got self-regulation. So you can influence over how you react. You can influence over your own motivation. So if you recognise you're doing something, you've got the opportunity to try and change how you undertake things and how you react. You self-regulate yourself, and you might start to think in a different way. And I had this problem many years ago when I suffered from depression. They had to put me through cognitive behaviour therapy, which basically was identifying how you were behaving and changing your patterns of behaviour and thought. And there's a Bandura article which is referred to in the readings of the course. I wonder what your thoughts were on that, if you've found it yet. Just to recap on assessment number 1, because we're getting close to submission time now. It is due Monday the 8th of the 8th. You've got until 11:45 in the evening to submit it, then turn it in, shuts it off, and you won't be able to get it in. Task 1, just go and have a look at week 1 and this session. Task 2, again that's covered in week 1 and 3. Task 3, week 1 and 2, so review back to it. They're not long lectures, as you know. We get most of our information through our tutorial, so make sure everyone gets to the tutorial. A few hints, so make sure you review the specified page length and word count. I'm not a real stickler for the word count. You can go over a little bit if you want. What I don't want is War and Peace. So it's really a guide to keep it roughly to the length stated. Make sure you've done the balanced GAL analysis, so the 4 quadrants of the GAONL. Reflections, write it in first person. I. It's all I. Not we or them, it's I. And you get any questions, well, put them in the forum or bring them to the tutorial, or even both. It's quite useful. And I always leave with one of my photos, just for a bit of fun. I think I showed you that one before. That's actually the Bombay Sapphire Gin Distillery in England, and that is their visitors' greenhouse, where all the different plants and botanics that go into the gin are grown, so you can see examples of them. And it's sit in the middle of a river. Lovely. So that should be enough there. I hope that I see you all on Thursday for the tutorial. Any other problems,